Welcome to the Bastrop Podcast. Real people, real stories, all from right here in Bastrop, Texas. I'm your host, Matt Walker, a local business owner, realtor, and entrepreneur with Wisdom House Realty Group and Bastrop Drone and Media Company. We sit down with the locals, shaping our community, from the mayor's office to Main Street shops, and bring you the voices behind the town we call home.
Good morning, everybody. I am Liana Walker. I'm hosting the Bastrop Podcast today. I have two very special guests on, Bryan and Claire Turner with Summit Outdoor Leadership. How are y'all doing today?
We're doing great. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, good to meet with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to sit down and talk with you both about your lives here in Bastrop and your ministry. So tell me a little bit about yourselves and your family.
Yeah, so I'm Bryan Turner, my wife Claire Turner. We've been married almost 15 years, like 2 weeks away. And we've got three beautiful, incredible, vibrant neon girls. If you're familiar with like the color code for kids, ours are all neon.
Nice.
And we've been in the Bastrop area for how long?
About 14 years on and off.
Yeah, just happy to be here, happy to be part of the community.
Where did you both grow up and how did you meet?
So I grew up in Cedar Park, Texas, mostly. I was born in Houston and moved all over as a kid, but landed in Cedar Park, so I call that home.
Yeah, and we actually met in Cedar Park. I kind of landed there in it was probably 2008 or 9, and I wanted to move to Austin, but couldn't afford to live in the city, and got involved with the young adult ministry at a large church in North Austin, and that just happened to be the church that Claire had grown up in. And so when she came back to that area, she rejoined, and we met and hit it off pretty quick. We served together in ministry a little bit, and then we like to say that we fell madly in like first, and that love followed after.
Awesome. I love that. Matt and I also met in a church ministry.
Oh, I love that.
Like a young adult ministry. So I'm very happy about, I always tell people to go to church to find their spouse. And they're like, where do I look? Go to church. You'll find them maybe, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And other community, lots of good community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for listeners who are unfamiliar, what is Summit Outdoor Leadership?
Yeah, so Summit Outdoor Leadership is a faith-based nonprofit based here in Bastrop, Texas, but we actually operate all over. We're kind of focused in on this area, but we kind of radiate out elsewhere. And our sort of phrasing, the way we say what we do is that we prepare people for purpose through truth, adventure, and leadership. And so that means a variety of things, everything from like leadership training and professional development courses for local churches, or we've even gone to like church associational meetings and done sessions there, schools and other, sometimes of individuals and things. But kind of the heart and soul of our ministry is to take people outside.
I love that. So how did that come about?
It's a great question. So Bryan and I have been doing outdoor ministry for a long time. When we met in that young adults group, we actually co-led a camping trip, and that was our first outdoor ministry that we did together. And I think that sparked something in us that we knew that this was what we were made for. And so Bryan had done a lot of outdoor ministry before we met, and then we got straight into ministry right after we got married.
Yeah. I had not done outdoor ministry prior to that, but I had been involved in like the for-profit wilderness guiding world after college, rock climbing guiding, backpacking, whitewater, kayaking, all that kind of stuff. And it was actually back in 2005. I was still in college, but about to graduate. And I just happened to be working out in Yellowstone National Park for the summer when a friend and I that I'd met there in the park, we went down to the Tetons and we wanted to climb the Grand Teton. And in the parking lot of the Lupine Meadows trailhead, we saw this van parked there that said something about outdoor ministry. And it was this sort of spark that kind of kicked off way back then. It was like, I can take this love of the outdoors, the skill set that I'm developing on taking people with me into the outdoors, keeping them safe, like introducing them to a really fun and kind of stretching adventure. And like, I can put Jesus with that too. And that was just like this little spark or kernel that like remained dormant for a really long time. And actually until, like Claire said, after we got married, we were first drawn to the Bastrop area because we'd been married less than a year. We were living in Round Rock and she was teaching. I was working what felt like a meaningless cubicle office job. And we're really searching for purpose. Like, what are we meant to do with our lives? And so I said, okay, that idea of putting Jesus together with the outdoors, let's explore that. Somebody introduced us to a camp based in Smithville called Wilderness Ridge. We came out and I applied and then came out and did an interview. And we kind of left that going, this is a really cool ministry, but I don't know if this is for us, because it was a kids ministry. And we walked away from that saying, let us pray about it. And just a few days after that, the 2011 wildfire happened. And so it's like a huge event in our community here. We weren't a part of it yet, but we just got to see that. And we thought the door is closed. It's gone. That's not an option anymore. We don't even have to think about it anymore. But it was getting involved in the fire recovery, where we came down and I started volunteering almost every weekend, sifting through ashes and helping people start to rebuild, helping this camp start to get its feet under it. And then I started hearing all these stories of people whose lives had been changed through camp ministry, and then like fathers and sons whose relationships had been completely redeemed through this. And I was like, wow, maybe we should be a part of this, Claire. And so we spent a season like kind of praying about that. And about a year later in 2012, we moved to Bastrop for the first time.
That's awesome. So did you grow up outside much when you were young as well?
It's a great question. So
one of the things I love about her.
So my dad took me on a few like father-daughter campouts, but my family has a property in northern New Mexico that was just a real rustic cabin that I actually spent kind of all of our vacation time growing up was at the cabin. And so we did outdoor activities. My brother and I would build forts out of random scraps in the woods. And I would take my Barbies and he would take his Legos, and we would make little cities in the moss on the rocks and things. And so I always had a great appreciation for the outdoors. I wasn't afraid to, get dirty and to camp on the earth and get some dirt under my nails, so to speak. But I really enjoyed the outdoors, and I've always had that appreciation, especially for like the mountains. That was kind of my happy place. So when I met Bryan and we fell madly in like, we also both shared that love for mountains and outdoors. And that was a neat connection that we shared.
I love that. So with like the new age of technology kind of taking over, how do you feel like outdoor time and outdoor ministries, how do you feel like that has a role in our current culture?
Yeah, that's a really intuitive question, because we all kind of sense that we're constantly distracted. We have all these things competing for our attention, and the outdoors is just a place that removes a lot of those distractions. You intentionally, by going out, you are putting yourself in a place of discomfort, because we're just, we're used to being at our home or our normal place of work or in a city. And so just by the mere fact that you have stepped out the door means that you're already being stretched, which is an incredible start on any kind of journey of growth. And so that's a starting place. Another thing that I think about a lot is I have a friend from here in Bastrop. His name's Bishop, and he says that the top 3 things that are challenging the American church are these big concepts of convenience, complacency, and comfort. And so, I believe that people need to be shaken up. Not that we need to be torn down and destroyed, sometimes maybe, but really rarely. And so there's kind of this balance of pulling people out and stretching them, but not getting to what we call the panic zone, which is where people shut down and they don't really learn through things. That's where trauma happens a lot of the time. And so building into any sort of leadership training, whether that's secular for a public school or it's faith-based for a Christian organization, that idea that we need to kind of stretch people, I think it's the key ingredient.
So when you take individuals out on nature trips, nature hikes and all of that, do you feel like they naturally disconnect from their phones, or do you feel like there's some like regulations or guidelines, suggestions, or how does that kind of play out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we've learned a lot in doing this sort of thing over the last about 15 years, doing Summit formally for the last 4 years. We've really tested and explored that a lot. And so I think people don't naturally want to let go and they don't want to turn things off. We want to stay connected because that feels like what is going to be best for us. Or like I just took a group of men out 2 weeks ago from this area, we went out to a park called Hill Country State Natural Area. And it's like a less developed Texas state park. So there's not a lot of conveniences. There's most of the places you go there, there's definitely no Wi-Fi, but there's also no like cellular signal. And there were guys on this trip who were thinking, how do I decide to disconnect when I am the caretaker for my family? I'm the one who solves the problems when they come up. And we actually had a debrief about this last night with these guys who attended this trip. And two of the guys said that was one of the biggest things for them, to be almost forced, or be really, from our perspective, be asked. We ask people to enter into this, but for them to sort of decide, yes, I'm going to disengage and I'm going to test and see if I can really trust that God's good and he's going to take care of everything, and or that I have a community around me that can help support.
Yeah. And that's really what like a Sabbath rest is.
Yes.
Is trusting I'm taking the day off and God can keep my business afloat. God can keep my family afloat without me. But I feel like that's a very common struggle in our culture, and many companies, many businesses and families, it's very, very hard to have time off. A lot of careers, you need to be on call. And so I feel like that is going to be an area that really needs a lot of help. Like
Right.
people need help with that area. Yeah.
I think like what we do operates on a spectrum, because there's some stuff we do that, like, we do free community meetup hikes that they only take like an hour or 2 hours or whatever. And you could have your cell phone with you the whole time. You could use it to film, if you get a call, you might be able to pick that up. We're just dipping our toes into the idea of adventure and wilderness. And then there's this program that we just did, which is a 4-day, what we call Biblical Wilderness Intensive. And we prep that way ahead of time to say, guys and women, you should expect to disconnect. You should tell people who are around you that depend on you, I will be disconnecting, so that we're setting them up for success. And, what's really interesting about it is that even making that decision, we've found that it typically takes about 24 hours for the external noise that's all around us to sort of be turned down, because we've made the decision to do that. Like, we still have all these inputs and worries and thoughts coming up. It takes about 24 hours for that kind of volume knob of external noise to be turned down, which allows for the internal noise to be turned up. And it's about 24 hours into a longer program that people start to really think deeply and be able to sort of process and work through some of the stuff that they have going on that they need to get to.
Yeah. I feel like some of the people who really could benefit the most from like a outdoor retreat are the ones who are deep in a tech job in Austin. They live in a skyscraper, or, they're constantly working. And I thought of something else while you were talking. With my women's Bible study, we've studied Proverbs 31 a lot in different chapters of the Bible. And one thing that I really love about the Proverbs 31 woman is she delegates. She finds people to help her, and she makes space for her responsibilities. And so that's something that I feel like I'm planning to go to the Wildership retreat, hopefully the women's one this year. And I need to make space for my responsibilities at home and delegate those to the people on my team and my husband and different things, so that I can make space to go to do this thing. So it is really about learning how to manage your plate and make space, delegate, and take a break, take a Sabbath.
I love that. I think that's important. And a lot of times we'll have people who say, oh, I can't possibly take this break, or I can't possibly spend a whole weekend away. And sometimes we'll challenge them and say, but do you need it? And that's a really important question to ask yourself, especially when you're trying to grow spiritually, is what absolutely needs my attention and what is God asking me to pay attention to more? And so when we can prioritize God as the number one priority and let everything else fall in place after that, that's the healthiest place we can be spiritually. So that's a really fun challenge to ask people to lean into is, do you not want to give up the control of your busy schedule? Or are you nervous that this is going to bring up something that you weren't ready to process? Or do you need a rest where you can really commune with God in his creation away from all of those other distractions?
I love that.
One of the things that I've heard people talk about in the last couple of years as the need for rest has become more widely discussed is that rest is a rebellion, because it's a break from everything in the world that's screaming for your attention. And are you familiar with the author John Mark Comer? There's a kind of a popular study that a lot of churches are doing right now, but I became familiar with him with a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And it is mind-blowing in terms of like, what does it really take for us to stop? What does it take for us to rest? You mentioned Sabbath. And one of the things that he talks about in there is that God has set up from the very beginning of creation, he's set up and established these rhythms that sort of govern all of life. And I love that he kind of puts it that God established a syncopated rhythm to creation. He worked for 6 days and rested for one. And then he quotes another author, H.H. Farmer, where he says like that's kind of built into the wood grain of creation. And so like when we think that we can go against the grain, we're going to get splinters. And so that idea that like when our life is not in rhythm, things are going to go wrong. And just because I'm talking about this doesn't mean I have it right. In fact, like I frequently have to recalibrate or have people in my community or Claire say like, hey, we need to reset here.
Yeah. This past year, 2025, was my year of learning how to delegate. And I'm a perfectionist. So letting go of a lot of things and delegating is a huge life skill. But I studied with my Bible study Jesus a lot, and he's like a master delegator. And that really is what discipleship is literally delegating. He sent out all of these people to do his work when he's like the Son of God. And he does it perfect, and none of us do it perfect. And so he released control and gave us and encouraged us to go and multiply. And so when it comes to resting, like Jesus would take a nap in the middle of a storm on a boat because he trusted that God was in control, which is such a weekly reminder of like, okay, I can rest because God is in control. And it's one of those spiritual exercises that you have to practice all the time. Like in basketball, I'm not a basketball player, but I remember back in school, we would have to do the drills, like repeated exercises that you have to do, whether you're on day one or you're professional, you have to continue those. And so I feel like the Sabbath is like one of those. You have to continually practice. But I feel like the disconnect from technology is like a huge topic. And I feel like that's amazing that you both are being extremely intentional about helping people with that.
Yeah. The Bible even says that Jesus, he not only took a Sabbath, but that he often withdrew to the version that I read says desolate places to pray. And so like we see that in the very beginning, even before his ministry, he had 40 days in the wilderness, right? And he was tempted and tested and sort of put through their paces. And part of that was that he went without things that normally that he would have. But it says that he withdrew and he went up on a mountain and prayed while the disciples were out in the boat, or he told them, hey, we've been doing a lot of ministry. We all need to take a break. And so he like sent their boat out, right? So he not only embodied that and lived in that rhythm, but he also discipled his disciples by demonstrating it to them.
Yeah. Sometimes I wonder if it's harder to believe and follow the practices of Jesus now, or if it was harder then, you know?
I don't know. That's a big question.
I like to think through that. It's like a mind gymnastics a bit, because we have so much knowledge now on your phone and distractions. I don't know.
Yeah. Even communication has become so technology-based in our society. And in the Bible, it teaches us how to have good conflict and how to talk through things and how to be loving and gracious and forgiving and all those things. And it's really interesting to me, over about the last 20 years, I've had this deep dream of writing a book called Text Message Marriage or Text Message Friendship, like a series of books about how much is lost when we use technology to communicate rather than face-to-face. And so like some of our professional development trainings are on communication and collaborative communication, how to work through team conflict and how to communicate your needs clearly and all of that. But also just on these programs where people are disengaged from the technology communication, it opens up this whole new way of really connecting with one another and building true, authentic community and honestly communicating with God, like giving people space to pray and to actually stop what they're doing and stop looking at, a phone or even an iPad for their Bible, just to sit in God's creation and to talk to the Creator directly is something that a lot of people have never truly experienced until they're kind of maybe not forced, but asked to lean into that. And it's really beautiful to see that communication flourish.
Yeah. And especially I think of the younger generations, they literally don't even know how to communicate without technology. They've never gone through conflict resolution without texting, without all of that sort of thing. And the ghosting and canceling culture, it's like, if you're mad, you just ghost them and it's over. And that's not healthy. Yeah, that's definitely a very real issue in our society, and I am guilty of it too. But at least I remember a time when I was a child where we didn't have all of that. I'm right there with the transition into the technology world, but the younger generations, they have an iPad. Some babies have iPads, which is, they're born, they have an iPad.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think specifically with young people, all that is true, but you can also pair it with they have a more honest and open desire for depth of community, and they're seeking connection, but they're also looking for a sense of purpose. So like, I think we can dog young people for TikTok or, whatever, right? Or having, there's a lot of studies apparently coming out saying like attention spans are, way down because of all the algorithmic social media stuff. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of beautiful things that are emerging out of the younger culture.
Yeah. And it's probably part of that like rebellious nature of youth to like rebel against like, okay, there's so much technology. Now let's do more authentic, especially with AI. It's cool to be authentic. So it's like, okay, that's great. Kind of a reaction or rebellion or whatnot. Going back to Summit Outdoor Leadership, what does a yearly cycle look like as far as your programs or even weekly or daily? What does that look like with what you offer? How can someone get involved?
I think the one about sort of the yearly cycle, I'll start there. There's a certain time of year that it's really nice to go outside in Texas. And that tends to be like late winter through the start of summer. And then we have, maybe like late August or September through the fall. And so we tend to ramp up more of our open invite, like we're putting an outdoor ministry course on, and people can go find that on our website, and we're inviting people to join from the community and all over. Or we might be working directly with a local church or a group that wants to plan their own custom trip that's not branded a summit trip, but it's like their church's men's retreat, women's retreat, or even a backpacking trip. Then during the summer, we do indoor things, such as our professional development workshops. If they involve schools, they tend to involve either the end or the beginning of a school year. But then some of the ones that we put out just for the community to come to, last summer we based those out of our church, Calvary Bastrop Smithville. Those are going to be kind of through the summer because we're going to be inside in the air conditioning. And not that like really changes dramatically from what we're doing. We're not in the outdoors, but we still employ all of our outdoor education sort of informed experiential learning techniques, like processes by which people get to explore the concepts that they're learning rather than just like a PowerPoint seminar. And so it tends to be those kind of indoor things. Anything that I'm missing on the calendar?
We've had a rhythm of a spring women's retreat.
Yeah.
The summer outdoor program, sometimes we'll go to Colorado with our family. And our hope is that we would bring some other local families or organizations to Colorado because camping in Texas is not pleasant in the summer. But we love, doing that during the summer break. And then in the fall, we've typically had a mother-daughter retreat. And then that's normally either late fall or early spring is when we have our campouts, our men's fly fishing retreats, things like that, fishermen. So we have some specific programs that we do seasonally. And I would say like our busiest season is really that late fall and early spring without the winter time because nobody wants to do any programs during Christmas.
Yeah, like Claire said, we've invested some time in the last couple of summers, specifically developing relationships with other organizations or people that can provide access to locations in Colorado. We will work on getting our own permits within the National Forest System to execute programs up there in the next few years. But the last couple, we've kind of worked with other either faith-based or non-faith-based organizations to kind of gain access and permits to those areas, take people in the outdoors. And so like this summer, I'm actually going to be going up to Wisconsin and doing a program that will be training for other outdoor leaders. It spawned out of a trip that I led last summer out of Pagosa Springs, Colorado, where I worked with a Wheaton University graduate student program for outdoor adventure leadership. And it was the 7-day field experience for these people who are going through a master's degree program in this one area, equipping leaders to take others in the outdoors. This summer, I'll be working with the Salvation Army, who run a massive series of camps all across the country. And we've got a regional coordinator up in the Midwest who would like to equip people and train them so that they can take young people on more like camping or backpacking trips. So I'll be up there middle of the summer. It's a nicer time, or a nicer place to be in the outdoors in the summer, right? Colorado or Wisconsin. It's different than Texas.
So if somebody wanted to sign up for one of your programs or donate, because you are a nonprofit, and if someone listening is really interested in getting involved, what are the next steps for them?
So our website, summitlead.org, has all of our current programs and upcoming events. We also have a place where you can contact us to request a custom event, whether that's professional development. We also even do CPR trainings through the American Red Cross. We offer women's retreats or men's retreats, church groups, schools, whatever. We can offer pretty much any of our programs to specific groups. And so there's a form there on the website where they can check that out. There's also a donate button at the top and the bottom of our website, I believe. But summitlead.org/give is another place that they can go directly, and that'll take you to the donations page. We accept donations for any amount at any time. We also have a big need for our scholarship fund. So we have individuals who have a big desire to grow spiritually or to really define their purpose, as Bryan talked about, but they don't have the financial means to do so. And so we've had a lot of generous donors in the past that will either donate just to the general scholarship fund, or they hear about someone who they know or who they've heard of that is desiring to go and can't afford it, and they donate specifically to cover that cost, which is just a really sweet way for the body of Christ to come together. And I know we've had many people who are like, well, I'm not outdoorsy. And so we recommend, we have other programs that don't necessarily stretch you into that physical outdoor zone, but really that stretch zone of spiritual growth that is maybe outside of what you're used to. And so we have programs that we can, kind of cater and accommodate for whatever the need is for a specific group. But also part of our ministry is having partners who join with us and provide financially so that we can provide programs to people who wouldn't be able to afford it. I think one of our big goals is that eventually we could do programs with organizations who help, whether it's, young moms, teen moms, single parents, disabled veterans, whatever those kind of unique.
Pastor respite care.
Yes, pastor respite care. So being able to offer some free programs eventually to say, hey, this is for your community or this is for your specific life circumstance, and we can offer for you to come because of the generous donations from others.
I love that. So kind of expanding on that, what is your vision for Summit Ministries in addition to what you mentioned? How would you like to grow? What are you kind of expecting or hoping for in the next couple years?
Yeah, that's a big question, but a good one. Like I said at the beginning, our heart is preparing people for purpose, which means that we want people who come to Summit. We want people in our community. We want people in churches all across the world. We want them to understand the sphere of influence that God has put them in, how they are uniquely wired, so their own kind of makeup and gifting, strengths and weaknesses, those kind of things, and be able to say, I know what I was made for, and then go through some sort of training process, whether it's specific like hard skills or soft skills, or just a challenging experience that helps them gain the vision for what to do next in that area of influence. And so then for people to be sent off and be more effective leading and serving others, that's our ultimate goal. From the very beginning, the team that came together to found Summit, we really clung closely to a Bible passage that comes out of Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 16, which talks about how underneath the Church of Christ, that there's not the Church of Christ denomination, but like the followers of Jesus, the body of Christ, that there are specific roles within the church. Some people call them offices, but these roles that they exist not to just do all the ministry, but to equip the saints to do the work of ministry. And so like helping people understand, hey, I'm a part of this. I have a role and a calling, and I need to be engaged. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? Who do I need to become so I can be more effective in that? That's what we're all about. And so everything for us is going to boil down to that, equipping the saints for the work of ministry. That being said, I think the long-term vision. So one of the certifications or training programs that I went through before getting into guiding was from the National Outdoor Leadership School. And so I like to remember that many different organizations and businesses have come to National Outdoor Leadership School, NOLS, for training of individuals and teams. And that even includes NASA. So they actually send almost every single flight of NASA astronauts will go as a team on a 7 to 10 day backcountry wilderness trip with NOLS, because NASA, with all of their high dollar budget, all of their incredibly demanding training schedule, and everything that has to do to lead up to that, they see it as incredibly valuable for that team of astronauts to go out together into the wilderness, be trained by qualified instructors on things to do with team leadership and communication and judgment and decision-making, all those kind of things, and to bond together so that when they're actually in space, they can operate effectively as a team. And so the analogy that I like to think is, what if the church got that vision too? Like, what if ministry training schools, like seminaries, what if Bible colleges, what if missionaries who are preparing to go to the field understood the importance of stopping, withdrawing from all the busyness and stress and everything else that's going on, and budgeting some time, intentionally entering into a space of development with the Lord? I would love for Summit to facilitate those things. And it's cool because we're starting to get involved with organizations like Salvation Army camps. We've got contacts who are teaching at seminaries and want us to get involved in there. So I don't know what that means in the near term, but that's sort of the long-term vision, both for individuals and for organizations, that we would help equip them to go out back into their sphere of influence and be far more effective.
Wonderful. I love that. So we like to ask our podcast guests for 60 seconds of wisdom. So you each can have 60 seconds. It can be either about anything we talked about today, or it can be anything in your life that you would like to share with the listeners.
Who wants to go first?
You can go first.
Oh my goodness. I'll give you time to think, I guess. I would love for your listeners to know, in a real sense, to really know that they were made for something. I would love for your listeners to know that they are uniquely and beautifully created. They've been wired a certain way. They have strengths and weaknesses. They have maybe spiritual giftings if they're a follower of Jesus. They have past experiences. They have trainings. All this kind of stuff comes together to tell us what they were made to do. And the second thing is that whether you think you do or not, you have a sphere of influence. Somebody's depending on you. It could be, for a mom, it could be your home, it could be your children, but it also is probably your friend group. It's the church or other community events that you're involved in. If you run an organization or a company, then you probably have more clarity on what that sphere of influence is. But for us to put those two things together, to say, I have a place to have a mission and I understand who I am within that mission, that's where we start to really move forward.
Love that. Thank you. How about you, Claire?
I'm really deeply involved in this wild retreat that's coming up in May. And I've had just a lot of time to reflect on kind of what Bryan hit on with the purpose and the influence that we have in the world. And so our retreat in May for women is focused on being faithful. So faithfully abiding in Christ, fully identifying as a daughter of the King, as a disciple of Christ with a calling on our lives that takes that daily abiding, that daily reminder to do everything through the lens of Jesus. And then our second piece is being fruitful, and not for the sake of our own good, not for the sake of our own recognition or anything like that, but really Jesus calls us to be fruitful so that we can replicate it in others and so that we can feed others. and do that spiritually. And so having the fruit of the Spirit in us, showing love to our community, having joy, being a peacemaker, having patience and faithfulness, goodness, kindness, all of the fruits of the Spirit, and self-control, which is so hard. But when we are fruitful after we've been faithful, then we can really flourish in our calling and in our identity in Christ, and we can really influence others. And so our third piece for this retreat, we have the first one was faithful, the second one is fruitful, and the third is fearless. And my hope is that your listeners and anyone who comes on one of our summit retreats or programs would take away that when they can fearlessly abide in Christ and just faithfully be connected with the true vine, there is no fear. There is nothing that God cannot do through you when you are fully abiding in him. And so my encouragement would be to figure out what your relationship is with Jesus, whether it's new or old, and really engage in that faithful abiding process and then see what he can do through you.
Wonderful. Well, I am looking forward to the retreat. I really want to go, so I'm trying to make it work, but that sounds amazing. Thank you both so much for being on the Bastrop Podcast. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we log off?
No, thank you so much for having us. This has been fun.
What is the best way for listeners to follow up, check out your website, and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so www.summitlead.org is our main website, and then you can email us at info@summitlead.org if you have questions about programs or opportunities or collaborating with us. And then we also are on socials. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for your time. This has been really a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Bastrop Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram at Bastrop Podcast and share it with a neighbor. We're here with new conversations from people who make Bastrop feel like home. Got someone you think we should interview? Reach out. We'd love to hear from you.